Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week, and I am very excited about your selection as we go back into the archives and do all of Conception's discography, a band that I have been a fan of for many, many decades at this point. Chris, how are you, my man?
Really good. Very excited to talk about Conception, and my goal was met in becoming a bigger fan of this band through spending 2 weeks listening to all their stuff. So mission accomplished.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. It's funny. This is a band which I've really, really enjoyed throughout my exposure. And I remember my first, and I remember, kind of how I've felt about these albums back then and how I feel about them now. And it's going to be a very interesting conversation. But before we get there, I feel like there was so much stuff that came out this week. I know we can't get to all of it, but did you hear anything that was particularly interesting to you?
Yeah. As always, just another slew of singles just came flying out. I especially enjoyed Metalite pretty much out of nowhere, just dropped a video and a song that you can get on iTunes and Spotify and wherever else of their cover of Sonata Arctica's Full Moon, which we discussed when we talked about Sonata Arctica's Ecliptica album. And it is so cool to hear a Sonata Arctica song sung by a female vocalist. I think it sounded really good. I enjoyed the hell out of that cover. So I thought that was really cool. I assume it's not going to be on any full-length album or something. It's probably going to be similar to when they covered Stradivarius's Hunting High and Low, and it just be a standalone single. Did you get a chance to listen to it?
I did, and what was interesting to me is, like, I just love when bands out of nowhere just drop songs that nobody was expecting, nobody knew was being recorded, and I thought they did a really nice job with it. They obviously have an affinity for that Finnish power metal. I don't know if they're going to do a Secrecy cover anytime soon, but maybe if they listen to the podcast, maybe they'll be inspired. But yeah, they did a nice job with it, and it was, like I said, completely out of nowhere.
I would like to see Secrecy do a Secrecy cover.
They're 15 years overdue, I think.
Hey, they liked our post on Facebook, though, so maybe no, I think it was Facebook. So maybe there's somebody still paying attention over at the Secrecy camp.
There you go. I'll tell you, I'm sure there's other things you're going to get to, but I was blown away by an album. I listened to it twice this week. I have never heard a note from Sweden's Dark Funeral. They're a black metal band. They've been around since 1993. Their first album came out in 1996. I've never heard a note from these guys, but somebody said you got to go check out the new album, We Are the Apocalypse. And I have to be honest with you, I really enjoyed it. And I think it's because I think the vocalist, it's in that black metal style, but you can actually understand what he's saying, and the riffs were really good, and it was different. I actually enjoyed it, and as of right now, I think it may wind up in the top 50. I don't think it's going to be in the top 10, but it will probably be in the top 50. I really enjoyed this album. I will post a track this week just so other people can kind of check it out, but there were a couple of standout tracks that made this thing really, really interesting, to say the least.
Cool. Another single that got dropped this week was Dynasty. They released a single called Yours, and this is the third single released in the last, I want to say they started dropping singles almost 2 years ago for their upcoming album, and it's finally going to come out towards the end of this year. So looking forward to their next album. It's always exciting whenever they release new material, because I think they're becoming one of those bands we talk about that always has a consistent release to look forward to. And I guess I'll just mention this one kind of came as a surprise to me, just because I wasn't aware that there was anything planned. But Fozzy dropped a new single called I Still Burn, and that's going to be on their upcoming Boombox album. And much like Dynasty, they also had two singles that were already released over the last year or two. And this is the third. So that's another album that, I'm not a diehard Fozzy fan by any stretch, but I always do grab their albums whenever they come out. And there's always a handful of tracks that I always tend to really enjoy. So looking forward to hearing what Chris Jericho has in store for us on the next Fozzy album.
That song Judas went over so well. I would be hard pressed to think that they're going to top that. Not that it was something I particularly enjoyed, but I know a lot of people really enjoyed that. So I think it will be interesting. I happened to check that Dynasty album is due out on August 26th, so it'll be out before the end of the summer. But there's been a build for this thing for what seems like forever. Right? You make a really good point. It's when it finally comes out, I think it'll be very interesting. They are quite consistent. I do still think that Renatus is probably their best album, hands down. Although I did really enjoy the last one as well. And these singles sound good, so they're really kind of hitting a groove right now, in my opinion.
I have a little fact that I think is going to blow your mind. But did you know that the Fozzy Judas video on YouTube has 55 million views?
55 million views.
Yeah.
No, that is wild. That is, I mean, I don't know what the pay ratio is on YouTube, but I know a lot of those YouTube child stars or like those YouTube personalities make a lot of money when they get over like 1 million views or something like that. 55 million is a number that I just can't even appreciate. I don't know that I would ever watch it a second time. So God bless the people that are hitting refresh on that.
Yeah. And we're talking about a band that's not like playing arenas or anything like that. You know, Fozzy's still kind of what I would consider like a club metal band. But I guess that tie-in with wrestling and that being his entrance in AEW and everybody singing along to it probably has something to do with it. But I just was very impressed by that number.
That is a huge number. And I guess the question is, are there any other songs that have even 1 million views? Like, are people checking out the other stuff, or are they just trying to learn the words to the one song? That would be my question. No, I'm serious. Like, I just, it's crazy. I have no idea what their popularity is.
I mean, I'm looking through, like, so Sane is a song that's going to be on the upcoming album as well. And so that dropped 9 months ago. That has 2.7 million. Painless from 4 years ago has 10 million. So, yeah.
So he'll be headlining Wacken in about 6 months is what you're telling me.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a following here. I don't know how many of them are wrestling fans. There's a song I really like from 9 years ago called Sandpaper, which includes M Shadows from Avenged Sevenfold. Really good song. That has 4.5 million views. So yeah, I mean,
but yet they're playing clubs, like you said. They're not doing arena tours, which with these kinds of numbers, you would think they'd be playing like 8,000 seat arenas. You'd think.
Yeah, this is like mostly newer like releases in the last 3 years. So I'm wondering if maybe the Judas effect, if you will, just kind of like got people interested in the band, because like they're like the song. It looks like this was only posted 11 months ago, but this is a much older song. Enemy only has 389,000 views only, I say. But, trumped only by our Manowar episode, I guess. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know how we went down the rabbit hole on Fozzy, but I just thought that was really interesting because I was like thinking to myself, like, yeah, doesn't Judas have a lot of YouTube views? And I didn't realize it was 55 million. That's pretty impressive.
Incredible. I'm impressed. I'm sure this will have 55 million very soon as well, but we'll give it a little bit of time. Before we leave, I'll just say that one other album of note, James LaBrie, he dropped a single for his new solo album, which is due out on May 20th. The album is going to be called Beautiful Shade of Grey. I know that you were very, very excited because he's collaborating with one of your favorite musicians from Eden's Curse. What did you think of the new single, Devil and Drag?
Not what I expected, but in a good way. Just kind of had like a 70s prog rock vibe to it, which is interesting. And I'm at the front of the line of people to give flack to James LaBrie as a live performer, but I mean, he always sounds great in the studio. Like, I always look forward to hearing. Like, I have no issue with Dream Theater studio material or any of his solo stuff. In fact, I rather enjoyed his last solo album, which came out a while ago. So it'll be interesting. But I'm a big fan of Paul Logue of Eden's Curse, and so I'm wondering if this collaboration. It looks like they co-wrote the single "Devil and Drag," so I don't know if he has a lot of writing credits on this album, but if it means that it's going to be kind of a little bit more key driven, the way that Eden's Curse kind of is, then that'd be cool with me. But I'm definitely very curious to see how this album is. It's going to be called Beautiful Shade of Grey.
Yeah, no question, no question about it. That being said, as much as I enjoyed a lot of this stuff that we just talked about, I spent the vast majority of my week when I wasn't listening to Dark Funeral, I was listening to Conception. So I am really, really excited for this. And I think that you made an excellent choice. Just to set the stage a little bit, they are one of the headliners for Prog Power this year. The show takes place the first week in June. I think they're playing on Friday night, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they go on last, if I'm also not mistaken. So at the end of this, we actually, I think, did something interesting in the sense that we kind of listened to all their stuff and we came up with a set list for the band that we would like them to play, kind of our dream set list. So we'll compare those notes, I guess, a little bit towards the end. But before we kind of walk through the discography, and I'm sure we won't go song by song, there's just so much here. And I'll kind of paint some history where I can. I really am curious, when was the first time you heard them, and was it probably from Ralph's tape back in 1997? That would have to be my guess.
Well, it actually isn't, and it's kind of funny. So what happened was, Ralph had made that original tape for me, and the tape somehow got taped over or lost or something, and I had the liner, that Ralph wrote with his chicken scratch handwriting, which I still have to this day, by the way.
He is a doctor, so it actually adds up, because we didn't know it when we were 15, but now it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably walk into a drugstore and get a prescription for Ambien with my old liner notes from 1997. But sidebar, I probably disposed of like all of my old cassette tapes, but I kept all those liner notes. I remember printing like custom liner notes using Microsoft Publisher and a dot matrix printer, and just to have my like liner notes for my cassettes. I saved all of those because I just thought that was kind of a cool thing to have, and I would eventually transfer all those playlists to iTunes. I still have them to this day. But anyway, I was getting ready to make another mix, like my first mixtape, and lo and behold, Ralph left his book of CDs in my bedroom. I think it was just sitting on my bed, and it was like light shine from it. It was like Indiana Jones finding the Ark of the Covenant, and it was like so overwhelming because at the time I probably owned about 7 metal CDs, if that. And meanwhile, here's like this book of things that I'm sure like his cousin Pat got for him or suggested. I mean, it was the holy grail for us in 1997. And I just remember them talking about Conception. So I pop in Parallel Minds, and then all of a sudden my mind is just blown. Water Confines comes on, and I'm just like, holy shit, this is incredible. So I would go on to make what I would call Volume 2. Ralph was unknowingly responsible for Volume 1, but I would go on to make Volume 2, and the whole first side of Volume 2 was using CDs that was in Ralph's book. So I had used Eternity X for the first time because he had that CD and I did not, and Water Confines was on there. I added Crash and Burn from the Seventh Sign Yngwie Malmsteen album. So just kind of picking a few things from albums I didn't have at the time to make that tape, and that was one of them, and that was just kind of the beginning for me. And it wasn't until college where I ordered a copy of Parallel Minds from, I think, the Noise Records mailing thing. Like they have those little ads in the album, like in the liner notes. And I remember ordering that and Savage's Live 1994 in Japan album. And
exceptionally rare albums, I might add. Like these things have been like very hard to come by.
I don't own any. I only own Parallel Minds.
No kidding.
and you can't get the other three of the first four albums anywhere. As far as like streaming goes, I don't know who holds the rights to them, but like I really wanted to like share our playlists, and we just can't. I mean, we could post it, but the music is not online anywhere, which is crazy to me in this day and age. But so it wasn't until like fast forwarding a little bit, like there were songs that made their way to me mostly through Mike. And it was just like whatever I could find on Napster. And even then it was hard to find, like I would just find random tracks, and the songs that I would end up having were, Parallel Minds, the title track from the album. And then Under a Morning Star, which was the opening track on In Your Multitude, and then Hand on Heart, which was the Japanese bonus track on Flow. Like
that is like the most random assortment of songs. I can't get over this. Like,
yeah, and I didn't even know that Hand on Heart was a bonus track until many years later. So eventually I would get a hold of the rest of the albums, and I kind of listened to them here and there, and there were certain songs that kind of got onto my radar through the years, but it wasn't really until this week that I really listened to In Your Multitude, really listened to The Last Sunset. I was more familiar with Flow and Parallel Minds because I owned Parallel Minds. And then, I've purchased all of the new stuff since the EP and the single and the full-length album. And then they came out with a bunch of live tracks, and they re-recorded Roll the Fire, and there's a new single called Monument of Time. We'll talk about all that stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of my history of being a fan.
How
about you?
Have to assume that my first listen to these guys was around the same time. I don't exactly remember what the first note that I heard was, but I think it was Water Confines and Roll the Fire. That intro to Parallel Minds really, I think, was kind of set the stage for me. And even though Flow was like very much, it had come out, right? Because that Flow comes out April 1st of 1997. So Flow was out when I really started hearing Conception for the first time. But I was listening to the album from 4 years prior, and I guess as like a young fan, I loved the heavy riffs and the speed of Parallel Minds. And I always, in our little circle, nobody really paid as much attention to Flow because it was a serious change in direction from just 4 years prior. Obviously, Within Your Multitude kind of sandwiched in the middle. But what I do remember vividly is not being able to get my hands on any of these discs. So I think I went the eBay route around like 1999 or something like that. And I wound up buying all of these albums, except for one, which I'll get to when we get there. But all these albums used on eBay. I got the Japanese pressing of Flow with the bonus tracks. I think I was able to get my hand on maybe one of these using the mail-in approach that you used as well, but In Your Multitude as well. I remember buying that on eBay because I could not find it anywhere. And ironically, in a used, I bring up Mr. Cheapo's. That's where I got my copy of The Last Sunset. I was looking through their used stacks, and somebody had sold a copy of The Last Sunset, and I paid a ridiculous amount of money for that album just because the completist in me, I had to hear what that first album was like. That was a trip into it in of itself. And then obviously the band would go by the wayside. The Flow would come out in 1997, but the band would basically break up in and around 1998, and nobody heard from them for years. We'll get to the history of that, I'm sure, but it's just a fascinating band, and their sound has evolved so much that you can almost say that they've been like 2 or 3 different bands along the way, even though they only have the 5 albums and an EP. It's just a really fascinating ride that this band has gone on, going back to the early 90s when they formed until today.
I had every intention of going onto eBay and buying the 3 albums that I did not own prior to recording this episode. It is insane how few are available and how much they cost. There is, if you want to get the Noise Records like pressing of Last Sunset, you can buy it now for $50.
Wow.
If you want a copy of the original, I don't know if you ever seen the original Last Sunset. It's a different logo for the band, different cover art. You can buy that now for $75 or $100. There is a signed vinyl version of the original cover art, $360 from Spain.
Wow.
And then there's one here for $33 from Germany, another one $44 from Germany for the Noise Records pressing. So I want to say Parallel Minds was not as rare, and that's the one that I actually do own. Although now, like, the cheapest one you're going to get is $25 from South Korea.
Wow.
Somebody's selling the original pressing for $100. There's a Japanese version for $33, which actually is probably about what you would have paid at the time for a Japanese version. So yeah, I mean, like, it's just crazy. I really wanted to have copies of these albums, especially because, I mean, I normally would have just purchased them on iTunes, but the fact that they just don't exist in a digital format. You can buy the cassette tape of In Your Multitude for $50.
Wow.
From South Korea. The cheapest.
You can buy the cassette tape, but have no way to play it. But just kind of funny.
There's two CD copies of In Your Multitude on eBay currently, and the cheaper one's $90, and the other one is $100.
And you know something? I guess there's still a high demand, because if it's not being released digitally, people can't hear this stuff unless they go through some other means.
Yep, and I'm looking, and Flow, $76 for the Japanese album, $125. And again, like, just very few copies just circulating at all, which I would explain the asking price for these albums. So, if I had a few $100s to spare, I would just suck it up and buy them, but I just wasn't about to drop that kind of money on these albums. So, I'll tell Tor when we speak to him, that I plan on buying them when they are available at a reasonable price. Or if I see him at Prog Power, I'll just hand him $80 and just say, thanks, pal.
Yeah, right. And enjoy the digital, whatever version that you actually have on your computer at this point. It's fascinating stuff. Just to go into the history a little bit, the band was a little bit of a revolving door in those very, very early days, going back to 1989. They had different bass players, different drummers, a different singer, but the lineup that has been intact since basically 1991 is the same lineup that records with them today and plays live with them today. The keyboard player has changed a little bit over time, but Conception really is the four, quote unquote, main guys. And they're all phenomenal in their own way. Tor Aspi on guitar, one of the most underrated guitar players in the world. Roy Khan, who probably needs no introduction. This was his first exposure to the masses, and he would obviously go on to front Conception for a number of years in, I think, what we would both consider their heyday. Ingar Amlian on bass, Arv Heimdall on drums, providing that real the low section of these songs. But, they have such a rich sound, and I think the most interesting thing about the band is I don't know who else I would compare them to. The closest thing I would say is they have that kind of early 90s Queensryche vibe to them. But short of that, I really can't say that they sound much like anyone else. Conception kind of sounds like Conception. They started off doing a little bit more of the power metal stuff. They would quickly evolve into the more proggy side of things where they remain today. But again, there's no other band that you can say sounds like Conception. Maybe Arc, because of obviously the Tor Aspi connection there, certain tracks in particular. But for the most part, Conception has a unique sound that nobody else has kind of adopted.
Yeah, I mean, even Camelot during the Khan years, where Khan was co-writing songs, I mean, it was kind of like he kind of adopted what the Camelot sound would be, and he didn't try to make it, at least try to bring in the Conception influence in a lot of ways. There's a little bit. I mean, there's stuff that I think of even from like maybe just because of the timing of like A Siege Perilous that came out like the year after Flow. Maybe, but yeah, like it is hard to compare this band to anybody else. And one of the things that I was kind of hit by when I was putting together my dream set list was that this is a band that excels at fast power metal type music, mid-tempo kind of prog stuff, and also like really beautiful slow ballady type things. So like you'll see when we get to it, like that I tried to sprinkle in a little bit of all three of those kind of styles, and I think that it really shows how well Conception shines in all these different ways. And so, I don't know. I kicked myself in the ass for so many years, for not going to, I believe it was either Prog Power 5 or Prog Power 6, where they
Prog
had
Power 6. It was 2006, I believe. It was,
Yep.
I'll get to that show, kind of towards the end. What was interesting to me, and they do a very good job on their Facebook page of kind of going through the history of the band, putting up like posts, going through the chronological history of Conception. Apparently, prior to Roy Khan joining the band in 1990, they came out with a demo album, which was apparently rooted in thrash metal. So I don't know if they changed their sound before The Last Sunset, but there's a demo out there with them sounding like a thrash band in 1990. I am dying to hear this thing.
Oh, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I don't know how to get my hands on that little gem, but I have a feeling it's going to be more than I can afford to pay for it. But I would love to hear some of that early demo material, which probably sounds so different from the material that I've been listening to for the last 25 years.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, even just listening to the progression of the band from the officially released stuff. I mean, it's interesting how many different influences there are. I mean, I heard with Last Sunset, I heard a lot of kind of Yngwie-ish kind of guitar, like I don't know what the word would be, but where it's like like that kind of thing,
sweeps and arpeggios and all that stuff.
And then but then there's like a lot of Spanish guitar, like acoustic Spanish guitar that's sprinkled throughout their discography, which I really like. There's that bonus track Sundance from In Your Multitude. It was one of my favorite tracks from In Your Multitude, and it was like, I think it was like a bonus on a vinyl version or something like that. But I love that one has like a flamenco kind of influence to it, so that was really cool. There's just the ballads like Silent Crying and Cry and they have. There's just so many. I don't know. They're really good at pretty much everything they do. And then a song like and then another thing that I find that's a really kind of like a Conception. I don't want to say trope because trope kind of has a negative connotation. Yeah, hallmark, much better word, is like just a really memorable riff to kick off a song like Parallel Minds or Water Confines. Like it just, like that this song is going to kick your ass within 3 seconds. And I love that. And that's why that song Water Confines just grabbed me right away, because it was just kind of like strap in, because we're going to just blow your nuts off right now. And that was, what a perfect song to just be introduced to the band by, because like, especially at the time, that's what I wanted to hear music sound like. Conception probably ended up being a disappointment for me at first, because everything didn't sound like that. And it would take, 20 years for me to actually appreciate the band, as they were constructed. So
yeah, listen, I get it. Parallel Minds being the first taste, I expected everything to sound like that. And when it didn't, I think it was a shock. I wasn't quite expecting what they would become, but we'll get into it. I have a lot of comments on what you said, but I'll place them in when we get to the album. The Last Sunset, the debut, which we referenced earlier, this album came out December 13th, 1991. But I bet you didn't know this. It was recorded after about a month of rehearsals with Roy Khan. He joined the band, put his vocals down a month later. They released the album. It was completely self-financed. They did the mastering, the photos. The entire process was, I believe, like done by the band. And they even got some exposure from the British Broadcasting Company after the release, but I don't know that it ever got them to the level that they necessarily wanted or expected. They gained some traction in the Japanese market and other places in Europe, but this was really their first like experiment, putting out music to the masses. But it did very well in Norway as well. And what's interesting to me is my issue with this album traditionally had always been the production. I always listened to it and said, the production isn't that great. The songs, there's some good ideas here, but I have to be honest, I was wrong. It actually sounds a lot better than I remember it sounding. Surprisingly so for a self-financed effort. And I was just wondering, as someone who may not be as familiar with that piece, did you have the same experience, or did you say to yourself, this is pretty damn good for what was otherwise a low budget release in 1991?
It's a little bit more raw sounding than Parallel Minds, which was the follow-up, but I didn't think it sounded out of place for 1991, mind you. And I would like to point out that we were 9 years old when this album came out, which is mind-boggling to me. But one thing I did notice, I was actually in the car earlier, just shuffling Conception. Like I've completely melted my brain on Conception the last 2 weeks. But I did notice that when Songs from Last Sunset came on, that the volume dropped considerably. So maybe that's kind of what you were thinking of. It's kind of that, like, Manowar, Sabotage, late Halloween, late 80s albums where for no discernible reason the volume was just lower than other albums. It used to piss me off when I would make mixtapes and the volume on like Keeper of the Seven Keys was lower than the volume on Handful of Rain or whatever. Drove me bananas and pissed me off in the car today too, because I was like, I'm going to pump up this volume, forget about it, and then the next song is going to come on, it's going to blow me off the road, and I'm going to drive into the YMCA. Yes,
I completely agree with you. It took some getting used to, but just listening to it in a vacuum, it sounds pretty good, like much, much better than a lot of other big budget releases at the time, and it didn't feel like you were in this little tunnel with like 4 tracks. It felt like that there was a lot of stuff going on. And to the extent that it sounded raw, maybe it's just a function of that thrashy sound that they were kind of starting to deviate from the year prior. Like it kind of makes sense. There's some good tunes on here. And I won't say that any of them are like my favorite Conception tunes, but some of them are, some tracks really do stand out. The title track. And one of the things I think I'm going to hit on a lot, their title tracks are phenomenal. And I don't know if it's like a conscious decision, but The Last Sunset is an awesome, awesome ballad. And much like all the rest of their title tracks, often one of my favorite tracks on the album that it's on. Again, I like you. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said there's like the 3 buckets. Here you have Building a Force, which is that like fast, riffy, heavy intro song. You have The Last Sunset.
That one really gave me Yngwie vibes.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. You have the ballad in The Last Sunset, and then you have a song like Live to Survive, which is that mid-paced crunchy sound, which is kind of like the third bucket. And that gave me a lot of Fates Warning vibes for like kind of like that, the proggier side of Fates Warning, and kind of as they were transitioning from a power metal band to a prog band. That's what that song reminded me of. There's some interesting stuff on this disc. I don't think every single song is like necessarily the best, but there's some kind of good stuff. I hear a little bit of Watchtower, the band in Another World. I hear 030366 from Stradivarius when I listen to Fairies Dance.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, with that crunchy bass sound and the drums behind it. Interesting album, and something that I'm kind of warming up to over the years, and I definitely enjoyed it more this time around than I had in years past.
I think that you had lowered my expectations for this album to the point where I was like, I don't understand. This album's really good. My favorite song on this album is probably War of Hate, just because it opens up with this back and forth between like a heavy electric riff and an acoustic Spanish guitar.
Yes.
Like, it's so cool. I remember the first time I heard it grabbed my attention immediately because it was just such a cool dichotomy of those two sounds kind of like battling back and forth. And it's the song like really rocks all the way through. So, I will say if I had to pick a favorite song from this album, this would be mine.
I agree with you. I think it's a really good song. I hear a lot of the Yngwie sound there as well. And another track where it's kind of that dichotomy is going to be my track, which is Among the Gods. I just thought it was a really awesome way to end the album and a really good transition to what the next album would ultimately become.
Start fading now. You cannot win a holy war among the gods. You must run to some death. Now rise your head. Cause you're coming on my name. I live to die in pain. You must run to some death. Now rise your head. Cause you're coming on my name. I live to die in pain.
I'm a sucker for that flamenco guitar. That's part of the reason why I love Ark as much as I do. And when people talk about just the great guitar players, Tor Osby never gets mentioned for whatever reason. But when you hear some of the stuff,
I mention him all the time.
Well, you're very unique, and
I was joking, but
yeah, no, I'm kidding. But it's incredible. He's so talented, and I don't think he gets the credit that he sometimes or otherwise should deserve based on some of the stuff on this stuff. But a good album. I'm curious to see what you'd recommend, what you'd rate it on a scale of 1 to 10.
I give it a 7.25. I would say it's probably on the lower end of Conception albums for me, and that just gives you an idea of where the lower end of Conception is in the low sevens. I mean, that's pretty much to me. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I would go. Maybe, I don't know. Nah, you know what? I'm going to say 7.5. I'm going to change my score as I've been want to do lately. Yeah, 7.5. It's very solid. It's like you said, I don't think there's any one song that really blows you out of the water. Like I said, War of Hate probably is my favorite. But just really solid. I was expecting it to be not as good, and it was actually a very pleasant surprise. And it was not, I'm going to say it's not my least favorite Conception album.
I cannot say the same. I will say that if you had told me what would you rank this album going into the week, I would have said this is the lowest album. It's probably a 5 or a 6 for me. I think that with the repetition and just more of the appreciation that I do now, I will say it's a 7, but it is my least favorite of all of their albums. So again, I think it's a testament to the strength of the band, more so than anything else. I think as I've gotten older, I've fallen in love with that more modern proggy sound that they have, and this wasn't that. So it's never going to be in that rarefied air as some of the stuff that would come after. But for a debut album, I think you could do a lot worse. And to be honest with you, if I was listening to it at the time, if it was early 1992 and I got my hands on this, I would be craving more material because I would just want to hear more and more of their stuff. And it would be 2 years before they actually came out with Parallel Minds. That would be their follow-up effort. It came out in September of 1993. And what's interesting about this album, as I said, this was the first one that I heard straight through in its entirety. 10 tracks, 51 minutes and change in length. But the engineer on this album and the kind of like the mastermind behind, I guess, the sound, I did not realize this, but my understanding is that the Tommy Newton has a lot to do with the sound on this one. I know that he would become or get the credits on Conception's Flow in 1997, but I believe he did have a hand in this one as well. I could be wrong, but it is interesting because you can hear an upgrade in terms of the way they employ different types of sound and keyboard patches throughout this whole thing. This is a low-key masterpiece.
Yeah, I don't know if he was like kind of a guy that Noise would use a lot. And Noise Records was like, they had some pretty like epic bands on their their label. They don't exist anymore, or do they? No, they kind of I think they melded into like BMG and Sanctuary and all that. So like Noise Records by name doesn't exist anymore. But I mean, you're talking about Halloween and Camelot, and I'm gonna dig into the coffers here with Mercury Rising and Skyclad. Some of the names I haven't heard in a long time. They had Wasp and Silent Force and Running Wild and Persuader, Morgana Le Fay. Just a lot of kind of names you'd recognize. Dragon Force, I think initially Gamma Ray. I remember having Gamma Ray and Halloween albums from Noise Records, and oftentimes there would be like misprints. I remember specifically this album had the booklet had like the Japanese liner notes. So like it had black on black in the liner notes for some reason, even though it wasn't on the album. And I had another disc from Stradivarius that I think was released through Noise or one of their subsidiaries, where it was like the US packaging, but the disc itself was the Japanese version, and it had 2 bonus tracks on it, which I was like, holy shit, I got bonus tracks. Awesome. That was my takeaway from what Noise Records was all about. Tommy Newton and misprints. But this was I agree with you. This album is fantastic. I still get friggin' amped as hell when I hear Water Confines kick in. But then, you go into like Roll the Fire, which I think is one of their best like mid-tempo tunes, and something I'm really hoping we get to hear live. But what I was going to say is, after talking about Last Sunset, if you gave Last Sunset and Flow to somebody who'd never heard Conception, I'm sure the first thing they'd say is, how the hell did they get from A to B
in 6 years?
Yeah, but if you listen, and we'll talk about it, when you listen to Parallel Minds and In Your Multitude, you can kind of see that path to Flow, but it's jarring if you go from one all the way to the other in just 7 years, or whatever, 6-7 years. The band sounds so different. There's so much more polish with Flow. So I just think that's interesting. And so getting back to Parallel Minds, I feel like this is kind of the next, the next natural progression from their debut album.
Yeah, I agree. Tor gets all the writing credits for the music. Roy Khan does the lyrics and writes the lyrics for all of these songs. What's interesting is when this came out, they actually said that they had 3 albums worth of material when they went into the studio to record Parallel Minds. My question is, were the other 2 albums worth of material, did any of that stuff ever see the light of day? Did that become In Your Multitude? I don't know the answer to these things, and I'm dying to know, because if they didn't, how cool would it be to hear like 2 CDs worth of like Parallel Minds B-sides? I would kill to hear that stuff. Much like the Thrash demo, this is something else I would love to hear, just because of, this album is a step up in every way, in my opinion. It's more cohesive. It sounds better. I think the album, the songs themselves are more memorable. And I would go so far as to say that 7 out of these 10 tracks are phenomenal. 3 of them, I don't like as much. I don't think that they're bad. I just don't think that they're anything special. And that's why I can't rank the album a 9.5 or a 10, because I still think that there's, 30% of the album that's like, not so great. But just obviously we've talked about the first 2 tracks. A song like And I Close My Eyes. This is an absolute underrated gem, and Roy Khan puts on a vocal clinic on this song. I have tried all week to sing the chorus of this song, and I can't do it because the way he bends his voice, it's like he's using a guitar string to kind of bend the sound, except he's doing it with his voice. It is incredible. And then it goes into like a silent crying, one of the most beautiful ballads you'll ever hear. And then the title track, another like phenomenal title track in a slew of these things. And it kind of sounds to me like a precursor for what Ark would become, 10 years later or 8 years later. The side A of this album is flawless. I think there's a couple of tracks on the backside which are a little, weaker, but side A, I would put up against anything.
Yeah, it's definitely uneven. I mean, not like the first side kicks ass and the second side blows, but it's just that like the first side's just so good that the second half of the album, I think, doesn't hold up its end of the bargain because they just cram the first side with such good songs. Parallel Minds is one of those songs that I've known the longest from conception, and it's still, again, just opens with a really memorable riff that has those like really cool keyboard chords throughout, like the background holding everything together. Like you said, Roy is just, this is like peak Roy Khan, from a guy who's going to like blow us away for another,
decade
14, 15 years. Yeah. Before he kind of rides off into the sunset and then like majestically returns to melt our faces off in Atlanta. But yeah, this is good stuff. Is there anything like that you particularly enjoy from the second half of the album more so than?
Yeah, two tracks in particular that definitely stand out. I think The Promiser is a fantastic song. I think that's got a bit of a slow build. I love the drum sound there. It's one of my favorites. And the closing track, Soliloquy, is so well constructed and so beautiful. The bass lines are fantastic. The orchestration is fantastic. It starts out as a ballad and then just turns into like this heavy prog masterpiece. I think it's an awesome way to close the album. Those two in particular are probably my favorites on the back end.
Yeah, I love The Promiser. Another one of those songs where just opens with a memorable riff. Like, you kind of understand like what the theme of this song musically is going to be right from the get-go. And yeah, I agree with you about soliloquy. Easy for me to say soliloquy as well. This is like a 3-part, 9-minute tune. Kind of has this really cool slow build in the middle, like really good way to end it. And I want to mention the bonus track Black on Black, which for the longest time I thought Water Confines was called Black on Black because of the misprint on the album. I think I even wrote Black on Black on the original liner notes for the cassette tape that I made.
Talk about something that would fetch a small fortune on eBay. Your old liner notes. You should put those up.
Yeah. I would just end up buying them myself because I wouldn't want them to be sold to anyone else. But it's a good, like, I'm going to kind of come back to this theme of the fact that Conception, their handful of bonus tracks are really, really good songs. Like, really A-list material that just didn't make the cut for whatever reason. And this is another song that fits the era of the time, but it's really good. I don't know how the hell anyone's supposed to get their hands on any of this stuff. I was hoping so much that they would eventually get this stuff onto onto Spotify or iTunes or whatever. And maybe we can ask Tor. We're gonna talk to Tor later in the week. Maybe we could ask him where the hell all this material is and why no one can listen to it. Because it's a shame if there's people out there that have heard the new Conception albums and enjoyed them and can't go back and listen to this. I mean, granted, I think it's probably all on YouTube. But I mean,
yeah, but you'd like to get paid for it. I mean, the reality is there's so much material out there. And I think with the genre just being as popular as it is and them getting back together, I could easily see people hearing New Conception and saying, I need more of this stuff. Where can I hear the old stuff? And then having to go on YouTube to hear it. I don't know. I just feel like there's got to be a better way, but that's something that we can maybe find out later this week. We'll say that. What is your favorite track on this album? Because it's not an easy choice. I have to be honest with you.
No, I mean, it's probably just always going to be Water Confines until they lower me into the ground.
apathy, passion. I'm always offered politics. In the frame my mirror makes. I always thought I had the key to be the man I wanna be. But now I know I'll never find the man I made up in my mind. Falling, I'm one step behind. My dream was my way, no precious to play. A lifetime in the vein. The time is sometimes so
It's the song that got me into the band. It's the song that got me in the album, and for me, like, for a song to just still have that effect on me after all these times, all these years, and just I still hear it and it just pumps me up. It's just one of those songs where, like, you need a little bit of a boost. It's 2:30 on a Thursday and you're working and you're hitting that slog, and you know you haven't made it to your 3:00 coffee yet. Slap this track on or go to the gym and put this track on and feel the power running through you like you're the ultimate warrior. I mean, there's a lot of good songs to choose from. Parallel Minds, the title track itself, is probably my number 2. Silent Crying is one of my favorite ballads by any band ever. Just a lot of good stuff here, but yeah, it's Water Confines. It was always you, Water Confines.
I'll say this. That would probably be the first love, and why it would be a little more difficult for me to get into Flow. I'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about Flow. I'm going to choose And I Close My Eyes just because, as I mentioned, there were things on that track that I heard this week that I just never even appreciated, having heard it 1,000 times in the past. I just fell in love with it this week.
but the beat to the breath, the sounds in my head. The grinning louder door provides my disgrace. Can you tell me why am I here? What's forced to you possess? Hold me tight to my dear, be my shelter tonight.
Quick little story that I think you'll appreciate. Back in the late, I guess it was probably 1999, we'll say 1998 or 1999, I was desperate to see some of these music videos that were on MTV during Headbangers Ball. And I went on eBay, and I think you may remember this. I went on eBay, I bought a VHS cassette. And on the VHS cassette, I remember watching this tape in my house. It had Ronnie James Dio. It had Warlock, and it had just all this random metal stuff that I was like just soaking up like the teenager that I was. What you may or may not remember is one of the videos that was randomly on this VHS cassette was Roll the Fire. And I remember seeing Roy Khan with a full-length head of hair and like a skull cap of some sort in this video, and they're in the desert and they're playing. That's what at least my memory is. I haven't seen it in a while, but I just remember this video coming on, and I couldn't believe that I was watching a Conception music video in my house on VHS in 1999. It was like the most surreal thing, but I still have the VHS. I just have no way to play it. So sorry for another day. It's in the attic, but a video does exist for that song, and it's probably worth playing this week just because it's something to behold.
Yep. And then another thing too that we will definitely be posting this week is there was a what do you call it, a compilation called Power of Metal that came out in 1994, and there are 4 really decent quality live videos and they're all available on YouTube. The account is called Conception Grand Again, if you want to look them up, but we'll post them as well. And you get to see some pro shot videos of them performing Roll the Fire and I Close My Eyes, The Promiser, and Parallel Minds, all from this album. So we'll definitely post those because it's really cool to see this young Conception from 1993. I think the tracks were recorded. But yeah, they again, like I said, all this stuff you can probably find on YouTube. Again, but it's just a shame. And yeah, make sure we post the video for Roll the Fire as well.
Yeah, it's funny so when apparently this was like a Noise Records label showcase type of thing. So Gamma Ray was also at that show, and so was Rage from Germany, and they all played together. And according to the press that came out around this time, Conception was the best band of the three that were kind of showcased in this little Noise compilation concert type of thing that they were going on, and the vocal and the tracks themselves are really, really cool. I definitely I'll post those as well for sure.
I'm having a hard time finding the album. I'm kind of curious about what else is on it. But I'm just having a hard time finding it on from Googling it anywhere. So yeah, I was kind of interested to see what other songs are on there from other bands, but oh well. We carry on. 2 years later, the band would release In Your Multitude. What are your thoughts on the third Conception release?
It's funny. This is an album which this was one of the ones I got on eBay. I had no other way to hear it, and I was dying to hear some of this material. It's a departure from Parallel Minds, and by departure I mean the opening track, Under a Morning Star, kind of lulls you into, here we go, this crunchy, fast-paced, melodic power metal, except it's the only track on the album that's in that style.
Solitude and change, always in your way, 'cause this is my land. Won't you join my lamentation? Take your time, remember, I can just a breath away. Look into my eyes, they're hollow, but I see was a glow. Only think I'm killing myself, not because there's other place that I know. Can you help me? Under the morning star, all my dreams, all the thoughts of my despair. Who
The other 9 tracks and even the bonus tracks, they're in a completely different style and much more akin to the Flow material, in my opinion, or a blend between Parallel Minds and Flow. So if Under a Morning Star was like your gateway into Conception, I think you're going to be thoroughly disappointed by this album, which I absolutely adore. Again, I do not want to suggest that it's absolutely perfect, and I think it's another example of side A being a little bit stronger than side B. But a song like Retrospect, fantastic mix, amazing verses, just an amazing chorus. It has the whole package, awesome keyboard sounds. I love that song. Sanctuary, one of their fantastic ballads with the acoustic guitars. It's becoming like a staple of the band for these just fantastic ballads. And then A Million Gods, which does kick off side B, is probably my favorite song on the album. It's very, very proggy, very, very catchy. It's kind of like the epic song on the album.
It's easy to forget. Love is really far away. For a dying of today, monetary comfort in the cross of silver. How to pick a savior from the
There's some really, really good material on here, but there was a period of time I think I would have said that this is actually better than Parallel Minds for me. I'm not going to say that. I think it's a notch below. And obviously, we actually have to go back and rate Parallel Minds, which we'll do in a second. This, to me, was a very good follow-up effort, but just a tick below just the classic Parallel Minds album, which, again, is 70% pure perfection. And while we're there, before we even get into In Your Multitude, what are you going to rate Parallel Minds? Because to me, that's like an 8.5. It's the highest of the highs, and there's some other parts that bring it down a little bit, but it is a fantastic album from start to finish.
Yeah, I have it at 8.75 for me. Just really good stuff. And I think, just some of those like lesser exciting songs kind of drag it down a little bit. But definitely a great album. And moving. Well, I'm sorry. What about you? Oh, you said it already. All right. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here. A lot of balls.
Yeah. but In Your Multitude, and I'll just kind of like lay this out there. May 3rd, 1995. It comes out just 2 years later. To me, I think this is probably more like this is probably an 8 in my opinion. It goes down just a touch from Parallel Minds, but I really like it. I think you struggled with it though, and you kind of alluded to that during the week when we were talking briefly about it. What does this lack for you, or is it just the punchiness of the prior album that you kind of craved? What's going on here for you?
Yeah, it's just a little bit too much mid-tempo all the way through after the first track, which I love. That's definitely my favorite song on the album, Under a Morning Star. I think that song really, really slaps. But the rest of the album is just kind of sticks to that kind of middle of the road. I will say the album did grow on me towards the end of the week, but it's still probably my least favorite Conception album, even though it's, I don't know, what did I give the debut album, The Last Sunset?
7.5.
Yeah, so this is probably just a hair underneath that. I would probably say like 7 or 7.25. I'll say 7.25. I will say I ended up really liking A Million Gods. That was probably my next favorite song on the album. Some Moons is also, I think, a really good tune. That's the title track. In Your Multitude is another good one. But I just thought that it was kind of some of the songs that I didn't enjoy as much were kind of on the lower end of Conception songs overall that I really enjoy. So, I mean, it's still a very good album. It's just I don't think it holds up as well as the other albums. And I just think I find The Last Sunset to just be a shade more enjoyable.
I can understand that. I do think that when you hear some of this stuff live, I think it will pop for you. I know that definitely helped me. When I heard some of this stuff in Atlanta in 2006 or whatever, I couldn't believe how good some of this material was. And I don't want to say that I overlooked it. I guess I may have just underappreciated it a little bit. But I think that you'll definitely, 2005, I guess, 2005. I think you're going to be very, very pleased when you hear some of this stuff live for the first time. And it would be less than 2 years later where they would come out with an album which sounds, again, a logical extension of In Your Multitude. But
before we get there, you have just any thoughts on the bonus material?
So Gravity is the Japanese bonus track. And then there's 2 extra bonus tracks were kind of included on the vinyl pressing of the album, Guilt and Sundance. I don't have strong thoughts on each one individually. I'll just say that all 3 are quite good in their own way, and they're all very different from each other. And I wonder why they didn't make the original cut, because, again, there's a lot of material. You have to almost wonder, why didn't some more of this unreleased material see the light of day when you hear bonus tracks like this? All very, very good. Guilt in particular being one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, I mean, Guilt is a remix of the song Guilt.
Right. That's true. But it sounds a lot. It sounds a lot better. Yeah.
It's like an extra minute and a half. And then Gravity I think kind of fits the mold of the rest of the album. Sundance though, I get why wasn't on the album, because it sounds like it could be from another band. It sounds like it could be from a flamenco, like a straight up flamenco band. This song is so cool. Go out of your way to listen to it on YouTube because it's a really cool example of how excellent of a guitarist Tor Osby is, but also hearing Khan just be able to mold himself into any sort of style. And it's you wouldn't think it would work, but it's I thought it was one of the most memorable songs on the whole In Your Multitude
No kidding.
experience. I just thought it was super cool. So I think thanks to YouTube, I think I was able to find those two, the ones that were on the vinyl pressing. Guilt is just a longer version of the track on the album version, but Sundance is like a real treat. If you've ever heard it before, definitely give it a listen.
Yeah, no question. It's they're very good at what they do, but something happens, I guess, because less than 2 years later, on April 1st, 1997, Flow would come out, and for a long time, this would be the last conception release of the big four that kind of came out during this 6-year period. And what I remember most about Flow, not only was the fact that the cover art is just so different from the cover art that they had on the prior albums, but also the fact that like a lot of people didn't appreciate Flow because they wanted it to sound much like a reversion to Parallel Minds. And that was even in our circle. I remember Pat just saying, oh, this album is essentially not Parallel Minds Part 2. And I agree. It's nothing like Parallel Minds, but as time has gone on, it's actually become my favorite Conception album. I love this album, and it not only has multiple songs on here that are some of my favorite songs by any band of all time, but the way it flows, no pun intended, it's just fantastic. I didn't even hear that joke, so I'm just going to ignore it and just continue. No, just
no. I said no pun intended along with you.
Oh, there you go. This album is short in the sense that it's under 45 minutes in length, but there's something magical about it. And and of all the Conception albums, it's the one to this day that I continue to play regularly, frequently. I play this album a lot, and for some reason, it just puts me in a great mood. And I'll get to some of the tracks in particular that I love, but what are your thoughts on this? Because again, very, very different from Parallel Minds, which to this point you've said is your best or favorite album.
Yeah, this is also my favorite Conception album ever. And I'll tell you why. Unlike the first three albums and even the newer material, I think every song on this album is very good to fantastic. There are no outlying, like, just okay songs. Like, this is just one great song after another. And I think that's how it makes it stand out. I also think it's the best sounding of the first four, production wise. Just everything that they're doing just sounds so crisp and so clear. I love this album, and it houses my all-time favorite Conception song, believe it or not, is not Water Confines. It's Cardinal Sin, which is one of the best songs any band's ever written. I mean, just incredible. I'm probably going to just cry if they play this live, and I think they typically do, which is great. But this song is just mind-boggling. I mean, if there was going to be a song of the week for me, being that we're reviewing 5 albums and an EP and a single, this would be my song of the week, song of the year, song of the century. It's just that good. I love this song so much.
I wish that I didn't sound like I was copying you completely, but it is one of my favorite songs of all time. And when I saw them in Atlanta in 2005, this was the first song they played as part of the encore. And I don't even think at the time that I was as big of a fan of the album as I was then. But after that performance, I went back and listened to Flow, and I'm like, this is their best album. There's if I have one track that I don't love, I would say Angel, Come Walk With Me, probably my least favorite by a hair. But every other song is so good.
It's funny you should mention that track because that kind of reminds me of what Conception sounds like now.
Yes.
Like it's a little bit closer to what their current sound is like. That's what
I agree with you.
Made me think of.
There are elements here that I love, but for some reason it has almost like a new metal feel of what was going to be happening a couple of years later, you know, in the pantheon of metal. I didn't love the vocal samples so much, but conceptually, the idea is okay. It's just not my favorite. But you've got tracks on here. Gethsemane is a slow opener, which is different from the prior two albums, but it's so catchy and almost like dance-like. You just want to move to the beat. A Virtual Love Story has this fantastic jazzy riff in the beginning with these sick keyboard patches going on in the background. Flow, the title track, again, a fantastic title track and a real preview to what Arc would be just a couple of years later. Really tight
By the
song.
way, like this is a song that like would have been their radio hit, I think.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
This has late 90s like hard rock radio written all over it.
Totally.
This is one of those songs that I kind of forgot about, and it was like, damn, this song is fan freaking tastic. Love
I agree. Two more I just want to talk about. The last
talk about them all. This album is that good.
Would It Be the Same, which is like kind of like the outro of this album, the last track. So underrated. Nobody talks about this. This song is just absolutely fantastic. And it's one of those album closers where not only is it just good to end the album, but like it leaves you wanting more. I want to listen to more Conception after I hear that track. Just a fantastic, fantastic song. And maybe my favorite Conception ballad, Hold On. I tried so hard to convince my wife to let this be our wedding song, and she was not having it. But to this day, whenever she hears it, she's like, this was the one you wanted to be the wedding song. And it was. I love that ballad, and I stand by that choice, even though I was obviously not winning that battle.
Yeah, and they were divorced a week later. So, I mean,
all good, all good.
Yeah, I mean, that I could totally understand why that's such a awesome. I'm glad you mentioned it too, because I don't know if it's a harpsichord or whatever that like it has like this kind of medieval keyboard sound to it is so cool and is unlike anything that Conception did or has done since.
I do for you. Just close your eyes and say you care. For all we ever knew, I know it's true, and I will teach you how to laugh and cry. The world succumb to our pride, to our pride. Won't you hold on, and we'll be forgiven. Just you hold.
And I think that this is such an underrated song. I also think Cry is another really awesome kind of on the ballad end of what Conception was doing. I mean, this album is just fantastic.
Oh, go
ahead.
No, I was just going to say and we'll get to that because I think it's a logical jumping off point. Out of nowhere, in 2005, the band would announce that they're reuniting and playing 3 concerts, one of which happened to be in Atlanta at Prague Power. And I my head exploded because they had done nothing for nearly a decade. And here they are playing this festival. I could not believe it. And they wound up playing, I think it was 7 tracks off of Flow. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the set list now, and I kind of want to silent cry into.
It is ridiculous. I mean, like it is just so good. And at the time, I don't even think I appreciated it as much because again, this album it popped for me at that show, and since then, my mind is blown. This album is a 9.5 for me. It is damn near perfect and about as good as you're going to get from any band or anything that was being released at this time. It's just damn near perfect.
Yeah, I have it at a 9.5 as well. I love it all the way through. And the bonus track, Hand on Heart, is one of my favorite Conception songs, and it's a bonus track. And I'm going to tell you something. I was thinking about this, and I was really hoping I would remember to mention it because this is how my OCD brain works. I always loved that this was one of those albums where they put the bonus track second to last instead of last because they felt like the last song should be the last song, not the bonus track.
Which makes sense.
And it reminds me of the Japanese version of Better Than Raw by Halloween. They put Midnight Sun was the last song, and they kept it as the last song, and they put the bonus track before the last song. And I think I've even seen Sonata Arctica do it where it was like 2 songs before the last track. And I like that thought is put into how the extra track is going to flow with the rest of the album. Again, no pun intended. I just thought that was so cool because as Hand on Heart would be a fine last track, but I think would it be the same is the better option for your last track on Flow. So that's just a little nerdy thing about how my brain works. And I appreciate stuff like that.
I think it lends itself well to, again, like how the listener is supposed to listen to an album. And I think that the intro is obviously very, very important, the first couple of tracks, and how it ends and how you feel when the album is over. So if you have just this random bonus track, which either A, isn't as good, or B, doesn't fit with the motif of the rest of the album, it makes sense to kind of bury it, 95% of the way towards the end, but to end the way that the album was meant to be heard. Well done by all the bands that do that. I think that there's definitely something to that approach.
I might have even pushed it back a little bit further and had it so that Hold On, Cardinal Sin, and Would It Be the Same would be your last 3 songs. And then maybe, because I don't know, it's just interesting that depending on which pressing of the album you got, you're experiencing the album differently.
Yeah, I completely agree. The band would play those series of shows in 2005 or in and around there. And then again, the band would go dormant again, seemingly in perpetuity. I don't think there was any indication that this band was getting back together. Roy would leave Camelot. Tor would kind of, I think, go more the production route and doing other things in the music realm, but not really releasing albums.
Before we get there though, what happened? Why did Conception break up after Flow? I mean, they released arguably their best album, and then Wikipedia says that the band broke up after Khan left for Camelot. I always thought that Conception broke up and then Camelot just sniped him because he was available. And I'm not one to really take what I read on Wikipedia too seriously. So I'm very curious, because Khan would go to Camelot and Tor would start working with Arc, which we talked about, full length and again with John Macaluso. It just seems so odd that this band was kind of riding this wave of, maybe it's rose-colored glasses. Maybe in 1997, nobody gave a shit about a Norwegian, progressive power metal band releasing their best album. But yeah, the fact that they wouldn't have any studio material for another 20 years is just kind of mind-boggling. Wild.
And so what happens is in the spring of 2018, there's this video, or I should say a photograph that kind of surfaces where apparently in Jofik, Norway, which is where the band is from, there's a picture of Khan and the rest of the guys either out in the snow together or something. And there's like rumors that the Conception is kind of reuniting or getting back together. And then I also think I read somewhere that people walked by this studio and heard Conception songs being played live. And sure enough, in short order, as luck would have it, the band was getting back together and they released an EP later that year called My Dark Symphony. It came out November 23rd of 2018. It would kind of be a precursor to a full-length album, which would come out a year and a half later. And I just remember getting My Dark Symphony and being blown away because I didn't know what it was going to sound like. Was it going to sound like the old material? Was it going to be an extension of Flow? And in my opinion, that really is the answer. It's kind of where Flow left off 20 years earlier. It's 6 tracks. It has an intro track and then 5, like, we'll call them like meaty regular tracks on here, 2 or 3 of which are just absolute standout tracks. Grand Again, which has been stuck in my head all week long. I keep singing this track to myself because it's just like unbelievably catchy. And Quite All Right, which when I first heard it was the track that kind of blew me away when I first heard the EP. Fantastic, fantastic stuff. I think that it's one of those EPs that has grown on me with time. I think that when I first heard it, I liked it, and now I really, really like it. Those 2 tracks, though, in particular, stand out.
Yeah. What would you, Grand Again and which one?
And Quite All Right. Okay.
Yeah. Great choices. I think the title track was shocking, right? Conception made another great title track. This is the longest track on the EP. I think this is a really the title is perfect. It's a dark symphony. Like it's just, it really felt like the band had just, that friend that you don't talk to for years and then you just pick up like nothing's ever, like no time's passed. That's this album or this EP. Yeah. Like it was just like, we're back and we're just, I think that a lot of different aspects of the band's first 4 albums are kind of rolled into one here. And then I just think that it's has a little bit more of a darkness to it than especially Flow. I feel like Flow is probably their lightest sounding of the 4 albums, and
almost upbeat in a way and like happy. Yeah.
And this is not that. Like this has more of a kind of down-tuned, like, kind of a sadness to it.
And almost. Even the cover art is like kind of dark and almost like horror-ish type of thing going on. It's different. And quite frankly, I think that the same can be said for State of Deception, their most recent album. It was in my top 50 for 2020. It came out on April 3rd. I just remember thinking, it's funny. My least favorite Conception song is on this album. And it actually is the first full-length track of Raven and Pigs. I simply do not like this song. I have not understood why they put this as the first track on the album. And when I listen to it, I keep saying, I remember saying to myself, what did I just buy? Why is this album start this way? And then the rest of the album is like really, really good. I think there's some good tracks and some really, really great tracks on here. But that first track, I don't understand it. And I think it's interesting because I don't know that they played it live. It could be wrong, but it's almost like it's not what I was expecting on their most recent release. It is not a perfect album, but it's highly enjoyable. By the Blues, I think, is one of the best songs of the modern Conception era. I think Waywardly Broken is also beautiful.
Vividly spoken, from far from grace to
those are two that particularly stand out. I think that a nice guest spot from Elise Reed from Amaranth on The Mansion, which is another kind of darker, quirkier tune. Good stuff, and just kind of picks up where the band left off. And I know for a fact that they are recording, and they are in the process of putting out another album, which I think will be out either later this year or possibly next year, depending on how things go. What were your thoughts on My Dark Symphony? How did it kind of stand the test of time for you?
The EP or the full length?
The full length.
Oh yeah, State of
Deception. I misspoke. State of Deception.
I liked it a lot. It's not as, to me, it doesn't stand up to Flow or Parallel Minds, but I like it better than Last Sunset and In Your Multitude. So that's where I would place it in my, all-time Conception albums. I think Waywardly Broken or Anybody Out There would be my two favorites. But I was thinking about, and we're going to talk about our dream set list in a little bit, and I was thinking about The Mansion. It didn't make my dream set list, but I'll tell you this: if they got the lead singer from Seven Spires, Adrian Cohen, to come out and sing the song with Roy Khan, I would gladly remove one of the songs on my list and replace it with The Mansion, because I think
remember that he appeared on the last Spires album, so like there is a connection there.
And it's funny because when the lineup was originally announced for Prog Power, I was saying to myself, they should invite Elise to Prog Power, because she does guest spots on Conception, Arion, not Arion, but Arion, Rhapsody's most recent album with Luca and Fabio. So she can just come out for every band and do her guest spot, and then just hang out in the courtyard with us the rest of the night. I just think that would be wonderful.
I like it. It's going to be interesting, and I look forward to talking about the set list. But give me a number. What for me, this is a 7.5. It's a solid album. I liked it a lot. I look forward to hearing some of this stuff live, and I have some of this stuff in my perfect set list, if you will. I was wondering if you have a number for it.
Yeah, I give it an 8.0.
Nice.
Just really good stuff. I'm excited for the next album, and I know that they're re-releasing this album later this year with a deluxe, I think like a deluxe bonus disc, and they've been dropping some of the tracks from it one at a time. They have some live versions of some songs and some re-recordings of some songs. I know they re-recorded Roll the Fire. There's live versions of Gethsemane, A Virtual Love Story. I think Cry is also live. Yes, Cry is live. Gethsemane is live. Roll the Fire is re-recorded. Virtual Love Story is live. And then there's a new song called Monument in Time, which just came out about 6 weeks ago. And that's a really good tune as well. So keep an eye out for that. That's just going to be something bands I think have been doing in more recent years, is kind of re-releasing an album a year or two after it's released. I know Beyond the Black is one of those bands that has done that with their last few releases, but just re-releasing an album with some extra content in case maybe you didn't get the album initially and now you want to get like a deluxe edition, or maybe you just want to. I tend to just go on iTunes and download the new songs that I don't have and add them to my collection. And I've just been purchasing these tracks as they've been released one at a time. Kind of cool way to get us amped up for Prog Powers, hearing them do some of these songs from the Flow album and Roll the Fire with the current. I mean, the current lineup is the same freaking band that they've always been, but of the age that they're actually at now. So I've gone from being mildly excited to seeing this band at Prog Power to being really friggin' amped for it. So
mission
like
accomplished.
I said earlier, mission accomplished, right?
Let us. I'll let you do the honors as we roll out of here and get to next week. What does your set list look like? And this is just so people understand the parameters. They're going to play probably for about 90 minutes. So we made it about 80 minutes of music. You're going to have obviously little breaks in between, obviously engagement with the crowd, as you see at all concerts. Give me your 80-minute musical.
I heard Roy Khan's going to take 5 minutes to roast all the current members of Camelot, so that ought to be good.
I look forward to that. I maybe I should have put on less music and more of that, but I want to hear what your set list sounds like.
Sure. It ended up being not surprising based on what we've talked about. It ended up being pretty heavy with flow material. And I wanted to open it up with Gethsemane. I think it's an awesome first track on Flow, and I think it would make for a cool way to open the show where it's not like blowing your socks off immediately with like a Water Confines or a Cardinal Sin type song. Kind of eases you in. Moves on to Roll the Fire. I threw on Hand on Heart, the bonus track from Flow, as the third song.
Nice.
I just really like that song. I have no confidence that it will be played or even considered, but that's what I would put. My one and only track from Last Sunset is next, War of Hate, followed by Waywardly Broken from the newest album, followed by 2 tracks from Flow that actually are back to back on the album, Flow, and followed by Cry.
Ooh, I like that.
Followed by one of my 2 tracks from In Your Multitude, A Million Gods. Then My Dark Symphony, which is the title track from the EP. Hold On from Flow.
Ooh, okay.
Then Anybody Out There from State of Deception. Then another 2 tracks that follow each other on the album, Silent Crying and Parallel Minds. And then for my 3 songs for the encore, I've chosen Under a Morning Star, Water Confines, and Cardinal Sin.
Okay. Wow. I like it. And we have, I think probably half of this is overlap, although I think the order is a little bit different. And I want to give one caveat. I wanted to hit all the albums. I wanted a mix between the heavy and the mid-paced and the ballads. And believe it or not, some of my favorite songs, like Hold On, are so perfect, I did not want to hear it live. I thought it was almost going to tarnish it. So even though I love the song, I purposely didn't put it on there, although I easily could have. So, all right, strap in. Here we go. This is my perfect set list, and if it comes anything close to this, I will lose my mind. I actually have them opening with Under a Morning Star. I love that, like, kind of eclectic keyboard patchy intro that they have with like the fake drums. And I feel like that in surround sound would just be really, really sick to hear to open the show.
I did have this as the first song at one point while I was constructing.
There you go.
This. But then I decided I wanted to save it to the end, so it got moved.
I respect that. I have them going into Gethsemane, so back-to-back album openers to start the show, which I thought was a nice twist. I have them going into Quite All Right from the EP, Retrospect, and By the Blues, and then we get into some of the older stuff. We go The Promiser, Would It Be the Same, Sanctuary, which even though it's short, I just think that hearing that acoustic guitar live would be out of this world. And then And I Close My Eyes, Silent Crying, 2 songs that appear back to back on the album, played back to back in the set. Waywardly Broken, A Million Gods, and you end the set with Flow before the first of 2 encores. I think Flow is a really, really good way to end the first set. You go into the second set. They come back out on stage with Grand Again, The Last Sunset, which I thought was a kind of a nice homage, if you will, to the first album, and have it as part of the encore just because it's the only track I choose from the album. They end it with Water Confines, and then they come back out. They do Cardinal Sin and Roll the Fire. They walk off the stage, and I'm very, very happy.
Well done. I would be thrilled to hear either one of those set lists, honestly. And it just goes to show you that, like, I just don't think you can go wrong. I mean, I think pretty much anything they play is going to be great. This is just, I think, for us, the upper echelon of a really high end band. But yeah, I hope that we do more stuff like this. I know we've talked about doing that, but it's always fun for me. I'm such a sucker for a playlist or a set list or whatever. So
maybe we'll do one more before Prog Power. Maybe for a band that I feel like I need to be more into, and for whatever reason either hasn't clicked or maybe a band I just need to revisit. But
I actually
we'll cross
have
that
something
bridge.
in mind, so we can talk about that in the future. But
Sounds good. Well, with that, we put a bow on Conception, something I am very much looking forward to seeing now in less than 3 months' time. A couple of brief news bit items, which I think are worth mentioning. You go back in the archives, you can hear our discussion of Mercy Falls from Seventh Wonder. Seventh Wonder is finally releasing an album follow-up to Tiara from 2018. They are coming up with an album called The Testament. It is due out on June 10th on Frontiers. That is a must-buy. Without even hearing a note, I obviously am looking forward to that. And in tour news, Sabaton and Epica are going out on a full-scale North American tour, which I found interesting because Epica has done so many U.S. tours and successful tours at that. This is kind of a big deal because both of these bands playing together, they're playing some rather big venues. It starts September 15th out in Seattle and ends October 23rd in New York City's Hammerstein Ballroom. And that is a big venue. That holds about 4,000, maybe 4,500 people. And by way of perspective, I saw Iron Maiden do a run of shows there probably about 20 years ago. So, that's a big deal. And I hope this tour does very, very well because the next step would obviously be much, much bigger into, small arenas at that point, which is fascinating to me.
can you imagine seeing Epica open for Sabaton at UBS Arena or Madison Square Garden?
There's not that many places to go that are much
or
bigger
hell,
than Hammerstein.
even Nassau Coliseum. I mean, that'd be pretty sweet.
I would not complain at all. So
I plan on making my way down to New York. I was planning on being there anyway because we're going to see Iron Maiden. Speaking of which, and Within Temptation. I mean, what a combo that is. Is that before? That's before Epica and Sabaton, I believe. Mm-hmm. So it's 4 days prior. So it looks like I may be making a little extended stay at your place. So
you're more than welcome. We'll have to bookend it with the two shows. I look forward to it. And now I think I actually have to pick an album for next week because I've been so consumed by Conception that I had to pick something.
I'm ready to listen to another band. I mean, as much as I've enjoyed this, it's bordered on overkill. So I'm ready to kind of move along. But
funny you mentioned that.
We're not done. We're not done talking about Conception, though.
No.
We're going to be talking. We're going to have an interview with Tor Osby dropping later in the week. We're hoping Friday, maybe late Thursday, early Friday. So keep an eye out for that. But clearly, we had questions about this band that we weren't able to answer. So hopefully, he'll be able to fill in some of those blanks for us.
Totally agree. I was oscillating between two albums for next week, and you mentioned the word overkill. We have requests for them, but we're not doing them this week. I'm sorry to disappoint. This week we're going to go back and we're going to do a band that we have mentioned one or two times on the podcast, but I don't believe it's a band you've really heard or given any really thought to, and it's a band going all the way back to 1991, and that's Living in Hysteria by Heaven's Gate. It's a band we've talked about in the past very, very briefly. Sasha Path's first band, if you will. He's on guitar, at least that's my understanding. Miro does a bit of a piano solo on one of these tracks. And this was really my only exposure to the band. I admittedly don't know very, very much by Heaven's Gate, but I tend to think that this is something you're really going to enjoy, that kind of late 80s, early 90s German power metal that you obviously like so much with Halloween. I think you're going to enjoy this one. So we're going to go back to 1991 next week, and we're going to do some Heaven's Gate.
Cool. Yeah, I actually do have that album, but I'm not super familiar with it. So it'll be interesting to give that a listen.
Nice.
Because I know that's one of those bands that's been around for a long time. I don't know if they still exist. The song I'm most familiar with is their cover of Halloween's a Little Time from the Keepers of Jericho tribute album. So yeah, this is the same guy who sang for Iron Savior with Kai Hansen, or am I confusing
No, that's Pete Slick if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure I'm butchering
Okay.
his name. The singer for this band has actually been on a lot of stuff, and he does a lot of background vocals on stuff. His name is Thomas Retke. We'll get into his career, I'm sure, when we kind of get into this stuff next week. But he's been on a lot. If you look at his like album credits, he's usually in like the backup choir for like a lot of stuff. You just don't hear him out front and center. But on this, you'll definitely, I think, appreciate the vocals and what this band is all about. It's kind of a nice segue into that scene and to that band. You may like this so much. I have a feeling you might go check out some of their other material as well, and I'm certainly overdue for that as well. But without any further delay, let's put a bow on it there. I look forward to talking Heaven's Gate next week. We have our album request for April picked out and ready to go. I'll give you a sneak peek at this. I listened to the first 2 tracks off the album just in my car yesterday. I think we may have overlooked something. I'll leave it there. I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised when you give it a listen. So that being said, a little taste of something that we may have missed over the years. So puts a bow on Conception until later in the week. Living in Hysteria next week, and I hope you enjoy the week. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I enjoyed this quite a bit, and I'm glad that we were able to get a follow-up interview, much the same we did with Shadow Gallery, which I think that was the episode that made me realize that we might have something here with this podcast game.
Yeah, it's funny that really did help kind of cement us and put us on the map. And to be honest with you, there are unanswered questions. So I think getting some of these little loose ends tied up will be very, very nice, and we'll kind of walk through the history of the band, much like we did with Gary back, I guess over a year ago now, so or something like that. So if you're a fan of Shadow Gallery, go check them out in the archives. We'll do something very similar later in the week. But take it easy.
Also, one other thing too.
Yeah.
Let's briefly discuss when we reconvene for our next episode. As of right now, we do not know who is replacing Brothers of Metal at Prague Power. Unfortunately, Brothers of Metal is not going to be able to play. Glenn Harveston's going to announce tonight who the replacement is, so we'll know by the next time we record. So we'll talk about that briefly as well. And if it's a band that either one of us aren't familiar with, maybe it's something we should cover before we head over to Atlanta. And I know personally there's at least one or two other bands that are playing in Atlanta that we might want to talk about before the festival hits in early June. So definitely some stuff rattling around in the old noggin. So I'll keep you posted on all that.
Looking forward to it. I trust it'll be an interesting replacement, and we'll go from there. Enjoy the week, bud. I will talk to you soon.
All right, take care, buddy.